What's the difference between DIY and doing it yourself? It's the difference between a part-time passion and a full-time business. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker. With a website that fits your unique vision and the business tools you need to succeed. Let your ideas flow with AI that guides you, but keeps you in the driver's seat. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Do it yourself. Go to Wix.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Attack the Baseline, a WNBA podcast where every episode we attack our baseline knowledge of the WNBA. And today, we are not talking about the WNBA, but instead, the NCAA, because 5 minutes ago, we had Selection Sunday activities. We know the bracket of 68 teams that will be competing for this year's national championship, and it's going to be an exciting time in women's basketball. But before we get into all that is to happen in this bracket, Kristen, how's it going? Very emotional Kristen right now. A lot's happening in women's basketball world as we speak.
Yeah, I'm really overwhelmed at the moment. Just had my Laces lose their game in Unrivaled.
The first Unrivaled semifinal is happening.
Essentially lost to Chelsea Gray. I'm really not sure how many points she had. Everyone's saying 40. Unrivaled is telling me 39 on the box score. I don't know. It was on mute. I was barely paying attention, and I'm very sad. Natasha Cloud was just traded to the Liberty. I'm sad for Marina.
Free Marina.
So it's just, I don't know what's happening right now.
Well, I'll let you process, and I will welcome in our resident women's college basketball expert, Dat. Dat, welcome back to the show. It's been a while, but you're sort of our go-to when it comes to the college basketball scene. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me back, and super excited to talk about the upcoming tournament, and there's some interesting things to get to.
Yeah, we were just chatting while the Selection Sunday process was happening. We were reacting to everything that was going down as these teams were seeded into the bracket, and I'm excited to get into all of that with Dat and with Kristen. But before that, little housekeeping. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Attack the Baseline. We always are talking about and learning about women's basketball. There's always something new to be discussed. And if you would like to reach out to us and let you know how, or let us know how you're feeling about maybe the bracket or about the upcoming WNBA season, you can do so at our email, attackthebaseline@gmail.com, or you can connect with us on Bluesky or on Instagram at ATBPod. You can check a link in this episode. We're going to provide the link to our ESPN bracket challenge. We've posted about it a couple times on Bluesky, but we are excited to put together a little bracket group for this year's tournament. And we've already had plenty of people hop in. It's going to be a fun time. It's free. It's just a public group. So click the link in the description or check it on Bluesky. And we want to have as many people in there competing alongside us to see who is the best college basketball ball knower. And if you would do us a favor, and on whatever platform you're listening to, go up and hit that 5-star rating and review, and let us know how much you love the show, because we're about to enter a new WNBA season and the draft's about to come up. But right now, let's focus on the women's college basketball scene. Dad, I'll open the show. You are a loyal Stanford supporter, and your Stanford trees are not in the bracket this year for the first time in 36 years. Give us the reaction to how you're feeling at this moment in time, because I have to imagine that that is a bit of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's been an annual tradition for as long as I've been a fan. It was a matter of how highly seeded we would be, rather than if we would get in the tournament at all. I mean, it wasn't a total surprise. Our legendary coach, one of the goats of the game, Tara Vonderveer, retired. Was the winningest coach when she retired, since passed by Gino this year. But and then we lost Cameron Brink to the W, Kiki to USC. So it wasn't too much of a surprise, but disappointing not to see our name called, as has been the annual tradition for the last 36 years. So,
do you think that next year they're going to be able to learn from that and get back to where they are? Do you feel like they're entering a season of some changes, trying to figure out, now that Vanderveer's out of the picture, is it just going to be developing the talent pool again, or trying to find the next Vanderveer to coach them into the future?
Well, Kate Pay, who is a longtime assistant to Tara and a former player, she took over the program. With similar kind of experiences with other schools, it's been hit or miss about former assistant coaches, players taking over like a legendary coaches program. Like Tennessee didn't work out that great in terms of like the postseason success they had. But we're getting the number 3 recruiting class in next year, so I'm hopeful that with the talent to come in, and especially if we can keep our top 2 players from transferring out, that's unfortunately always a consideration in this day and age where the transfer pool is active, especially after the season ends. If we can keep our current talent and integrate the talent coming in, hopefully we'll be able to make this year an aberration in terms of missing the tournament.
Yeah, I hope so. You do talk to us about how much you love watching Stanford, but I will say you love watching the game in general, and we've got 68 teams to talk about tonight as we dig into this bracket. So why don't we just start at the top? Region number 1, taking place in Spokane, Washington. UCLA getting the number 1 overall seed. How does that sort of shape this whole thing from a top level?
Well, I think that it's interesting that I think this year's field is more wide open than ever, at least in recent history. And even with like the case for the number 1 overall seed, you had a good argument for 3-4 different teams. So UCLA is, I think, deserved of a number of the overall top seed, but you could argue with like South Carolina or USC, and I wouldn't have too many quibbles with it. So it's interesting to see UCLA get that honor. I mean, they have not won a national title in their program history. Their coach Corey Close has been a coach that has unfortunately had a reputation of not winning the big games. And so it'll be interesting with the talent she has, obviously led by Lauren Betts, unfortunately a former Stanford player. I mean, Betts is kind of like Brittany Griner when she was, in her collegiate career at Baylor, and when she first entered the W. There's no other player like her, at 6'8", she's extremely hard to defend. And so it'll be interesting to see how other teams match up and try to negate her as much as possible.
Yeah. We've been fortunate to watch some UCLA here at the end of the season so far, and they do really seem like such a dominant team, only losing to USC, then to beat USC in their tournament just to get back at them. I know it's hard to beat the same team 3 times in a season, but it can happen. And I kind of felt like UCLA was going to do that, or USC was going to do that. Are there any interesting matchups that stand out in this region? I know you talked about maybe Florida State being a potential dark horse with me earlier, LSU, NC State. Like, what is sort of jumping out from some of the other teams in this region, or is it UCLA's to sort of run away with, would you say?
I don't think it's UCLA's to run away with. Obviously, they'll be the favorite to get out of their region, but I think the most interesting section of their region is in the lower half, and possibly a very enticing second round matchup between Florida State and LSU. They have injury concerns, possibly with Flau'jae Johnson. She missed the SEC tournament, but it sounds like from Coach Mulkey's report that it's mostly for precautionary reasons. And I think the injury is the shin inflammation. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not sure how long like a shin inflammation takes to like recover from, but that could be a very interesting second round matchup. And then potentially waiting for them is NC State. I would argue NC State's backcourt is only second to Notre Dame in terms of quality. So that could be a great Sweet 16 matchup just to have the opportunity to face UCLA in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four. So I think that lower section will be very interesting.
Yeah. Do you feel like anybody was misseeded? Was there any surprises in how they seeded? I know NC State had been one of the better teams all season, but I guess they didn't win their conference, so it's kind of hard to give them you can't give them a 1 seed nod. So do you feel like it was right to give NC State a 2, or should they have been one of the 3s?
I think we'll get into this later as we go into other regions with a team that might have been underseeded. So you could argue, Notre Dame could have gotten the number 2 seed instead of NC State.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll postmark that for later. So then, if you had to have a feeling about it, who do you think's taking this first region?
I think it's going to be UCLA and NC State in the Elite Eight. I think that'll be a very interesting matchup. UCLA, obviously Lauren Betts going up against NC State's backcourt. So I think London Jones, Kiki Rice on UCLA, if they can somehow contain Sanaya Rivers on NC State's backcourt, I think that may be the key, because I don't think NC State has the size up front to really match up against Lauren Betts there. And so I think my choice is UCLA to break their drought and make their first Final Four in program history on the women's side.
Nice.
Exciting.
I'll just say from this region, Harvard being a 10 seed is interesting and cool. Mm-hmm. There's 3 Ivy League schools in this tournament.
Very cool.
I think for the first time. I love a 10 upsetting a 7. Don't know much about Michigan State, but I would take Harvard in that spot. If anyone's asking.
10s and 7s. It's always a tough matchup to pick. I'm a big fan of filling out these brackets personally. Usually I've done the men's bracket in the past, but I did fill out the women's bracket last season, if I remember correctly. Don't remember who I had, but I also feel like I'm enjoying taking a 10 over a 7 because it feels like a little treat. Mm-hmm. Like, I can just take a little upset, even though maybe Harvard is way better than Michigan State, and I just am unaware of that. Let's get into region number 2, going down in Birmingham, which is headed by none other than Dawn Staley's South Carolina Gamecocks. What jumps out to you, Dat, in this region?
Well, I just want to highlight 2 former Pac-12 teams that are no longer in the conference, since it no longer exists, that have done well despite some program difficulties. The number 8 seed Utah, their head coach, Lynn Roberts, who you talked about on this podcast, left the program mid-collegiate season to head the LA Sparks. And then the number 14 seed, Oregon State, they are coming off an Elite Eight season last year, which on the surface might not seem surprising that they're back in the tournament until you realize they lost their 4 leading scorers to the transfer portal after the season. So and they had to enter in a new conference, and they won the WCC. So big shout out to both Utah and Oregon State. In terms of the overall region, I think South Carolina, as a defending champion, is still the heavy favorite. I would argue that possibly it's the weakest of the regions. I mean, no offense to Duke and North Carolina, but they don't have the star power to compare against the other regions. And so I think South Carolina potentially may have the easiest path to the Final Four among the top seeds.
It's funny that we talk about, UCLA being the number 1 overall seed in this tournament, but then you look at South Carolina having potentially what looks like the easiest path to the Final Four. Ultimately, even though Dawn was arguing in the case of them being that number 1 overall seed, I think it kind of worked out well for Dawn in her, quest to win another championship. And, we are Dawn Staley loyalists here in Philadelphia. We love the woman. So honestly, we can't root against her. It's interesting to see just how easy of a path it might be, but you never know. You never know in March. I've been watching even the Duke women's basketball team a fair bit recently. I've seen a couple games of their recent tournament, and they seem like they could be poised to maybe make a shakeup, but who's to say? South Carolina is just such a dominant basketball team.
Duke comes in as the ACC tournament champions, so they're coming in obviously very confident and on a hot streak, and led by Kara Lawson, who's a legendary Tennessee guard. So I think they'll be coming. And then the other team in this region is Vanderbilt, led by Michaela Blakes, who scored multiple 50-point games this season, is one of the best underclassmen in the country. So the Duke has a handful to potentially stop them in the second round. And then an interesting ACC interconference matchup in the Sweet 16 between UNC and Duke, which I think friend of the pod, Laura, might be interested in that matchup.
Oh, I almost guarantee, and she will be vehemently rooting against Duke if I know her correctly. And what you said about Blake's and Vanderbilt, sometimes just having the hottest player in the tournament can, be the reason that you are able to make a run. Let's see, what Blake's has in the tank. But like you said, it might be a hands-full matchup for Duke in that second round, assuming all things go well against friend of the pod Gilpy's Lehigh, making the tournament for I think the first time in program history, which is a nice little nod for the 15 seed.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Okay, what do I have to say about this region?
What do you have to say about the region?
I kind of hate the UU situation.
The Utah versus the U and the U?
UU.
The
hate
logo.
that.
Utah University. So you're picking Indiana.
Yeah.
There you go. There's another upset for Kristen's bracket. The 9 seed Indiana taking out Utah in the first round.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
For more than 50 years, National University has been a military-friendly, yellow-ribbon school that understands the importance of honor and commitment. With 4 and 8-week classes available, year-round enrollment, and more than 190 programs to choose from, We help veterans just like you define the next chapter of their careers. Learn more at nu.edu. That's nu.edu.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Now we move on to Region 3, also taking place in Birmingham, headed by the number 1 seed in the bracket that I feel like Kristen and I know the least about in Texas. What jumps out to you, Dad, in this region down here? Because I think there's some interesting things to mention. In fact, the thing that you bookmarked earlier about Notre Dame.
I think, well, to start off with Texas, they're a very defensive-minded ball club. Madison Booker, Rory Harmon, very good backcourt. They're going to engage in a lot of lower scoring games, but so that's kind of their MO on how they got to be a number 1 seed, just like shut down defense with enough offense by their like All-American Madison Booker. But as I alluded to earlier, the most interesting part of this bracket is Notre Dame being seeded number 3 and TCU being seeded number 2 and being in the same region, because that's a bit of a surprise. Notre Dame all season long had been touted as a top seed and even a possible number 1 overall seed until the late season slump. So it's very interesting that they not only dropped to a number 2 seed, not below a number 2 seed, but to a number 3 seed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has to do something for the club. Like sometimes being disrespected, I say in quotes, even though the end of the season wasn't what Notre Dame was expecting. I have to imagine that, that backcourt is going to be playing with ferocity that they might not have had in the tank to end that season. I know Hidalgo is a very controversial figure, understandably so, but Sony Citron and Olivia Miles are slated to be, maybe the 2 and the 3 in this upcoming WNBA draft. So it would be, reasonable to think that Notre Dame could make a run if things break right here. Do you feel like if they were to make that push and to go up against the Texas in the Elite Eight, do you think they have what it takes to take out that program, even though Texas is, only 3 losses on the season?
I think so. I think Notre Dame is a little bit deeper in terms of scoring threats. Obviously, they have, I think, the best backcourt in the country with Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, and Sonia Citron. So I think that they just have a little too much scoring power against Texas, even against that elite defense. And so I would pick them to not only beat TCU and possibly getting vengeance, because TCU did beat them in a Thanksgiving week tournament, and then to beat Texas in the Elite Eight to make the Final Four. So I would pick the Fighting Irish, and I think they'll have a chip on their shoulders. I mean, they've had wins over USC, UConn. So they have an excellent probably arguably one of the best resumes for a number 3 seed in in recent tournament history.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Dad, can you talk to me a little bit more about TCU? Because I know Haley Van Lith is on that team, who was recently in 3-on-3 in the Olympics. But I really hadn't heard much about them the whole season. They won their conference, so that was great, obviously. But I don't really know anyone else on that team.
Well, they are, in this landscape of transfers, their starting lineup is pretty much all transfers. Not only do they have Haley Van Lith, who's on her 3rd collegiate team started out with Louisville, who they could play in the second round, which that would be an interesting storyline of her going up against her first collegiate program. They also have Sedona Prince, originally from Oregon, who's I think in her 6th or 7th year of college eligibility. They have a former Stanford player in Agnes Emanopu. And they're just off a season last year. They had so many injuries last year that the program actually had to hold in-season tryouts, open tryouts, to get enough players to fill their squad, because I think they were down to potentially 5 or 6 healthy players. So they, the first I've heard of, especially for a D1 program, of holding in-season open tryouts to try to fill enough roster spots. So just a season removed from that, they've had wins over Notre Dame, and they won the Big 12, and then now a number 2 seed. They're obviously very dangerous to play, but they're also not a great defensive ball club. So that could be their Achilles heel as well.
Okay, then I can see why. Yeah, you would favor Notre Dame over TCU in that case if they end up in that matchup in the 16. And then interesting to see that you feel good about Notre Dame knocking off Texas to move to a Final Four.
I think that I was just going to add the other potential interesting matchup in the second round would be Tennessee, Ohio State, the 4 versus 5 to potentially play Texas in the Sweet 16. Tennessee, obviously a very a program with a lot of history, but they have not made the Final Four since their last national title under led by Candace Parker back in 2008. So they have a new head coach this year. She runs a very fun, high-scoring offense, which took down UConn, which I think has been their last loss in the season, and their first win over the Huskies in about probably 15 to 20 years. So they're coming in on a high, and Ohio State is a very good, solid program. Very good freshman, Jelona Cambridge. So that should be a fun second round matchup in that region.
Yeah, something to look forward to. Unless Montana State pulls off an upset. I know Montana State, at least in the men's bracket, had a big upset in the last couple years, and Stephen of Boston as well. Kristen, what do you feel about this bracket?
What's my
about
upset?
This region? Well,
Okay,
it doesn't
wait.
have to be an upset. You could just, which game are you picking? Which game are you feeling?
Oh. Well, this is Michigan and the 11 seed, which is a play-in.
Yeah, the 11 seed. This would be in Region 3. Iowa State and Princeton. So one of those Ivy League teams that you talked about.
Am I just going Ivy League pilled?
You going Princeton?
No.
You thinking Princeton wins 2 in a row there?
They can get hot, these Ivy Leagues. I won't go back.
No.
I mean, look, anything I'm going to say is going to mostly be based on my men's historical tournaments, but I like Creighton.
Oh, yeah, the Blue Jays. Anything on Creighton or on Princeton that...
Well, Princeton, a player that is no longer on Princeton's team, but will be talked about shortly as we go into the final region, is going to, I think, play a big role in one of the favorites teams' potential run to a Final Four. Caitlin Chen, member of the UConn squad, is a transfer former Ivy League Player of the Year. Is now with the Huskies, so I'll save my comments until we get to that section. But yeah, I don't sleep on Ivy League. I mean, Princeton has had a good recent history of producing good quality players and tournament results. I mentioned off pod that Harvard was the first 16 seed 25 years ago in the late 90s to upset my Stanford Cardinal, to upset number 1 seed in either men's or women's tournament history. So the Ivy League should not be slept on.
There you go. Go Tigers, I guess. That brings us to our final region of the evening, the other one taking place in Spokane, led by the USC Trojans and Juju Watkins. What jumps out here? Because this is another interesting region with another superpower in UConn as well.
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head there. What jumps out is the potential Elite Eight matchup between USC and UConn. Paige Beckers, Juju Watkins. I mean, you can't get really any better than that. In a pre-Final Four matchup.
Yeah, I love the idea of it. That high leverage matchup that's not even in the Final Four, let alone like the fact that it's an Elite Eight matchup that we get it somewhat early. Sometimes the Elite Eight feels a little early to me in the bracket, but to get these two superstars potentially going at it, even though we saw them play each other during the regular season, it's got to be it'll be the hottest ticket. It'll be the biggest. It's going to be a huge game, and maybe the most watched game. Paige is continuing to set some records, and Juju's continuing to draw more attention. So when you put both of them on the screen in a high leverage game in March, like I can only imagine the millions of eyes that are going to be watching that matchup. Very exciting.
I'm sure it'll have a lot of WNBA scouts there because you have Paige, you have Kiki, you have Juju, you have AZ Fudd, Sarah Strong's only a freshman now, but you got potential future, top tier WNBA talent in this game. So I think you'll see a lot of scouts there at that game, that Elite Eight matchup.
Do any of these lower seeds in this bracket, in this region of the bracket, stand a chance to make any noise? Like Oklahoma is the 3, Kentucky is the 4, Iowa's here as a 6 seed. Could they realistically make any noise, or do you kind of expect this to come down to that matchup that we're already talking about?
I think there's a lot of quality teams in this region. I think, Iowa, obviously in the post Caitlin Clark era, great making to be a top 8, top 6 seed. They have a great transfer from Villanova from Lucy Olsen. Oklahoma has one of the Oregon State transfers I mentioned earlier, Reagan Beers, one of the top posts in the country. Kentucky, new head coach Kenny Brooks, who came over from Virginia Tech, just fresh off their Final Four run recently, and he took with him Georgia Amore, a very underrated point guard. But I think ultimately none of these teams have the firepower to match up against either UConn or USC. So I think that'll be the matchup that should be expected.
Then call it that. Who do you got between the two?
I got UConn.
It feels like you got UConn. Okay.
I got UConn over USC. I think the Trojans can be a little bit too heavily dependent on Watkins. I think they're watching some of their games, especially against high-profile opponents this year. Especially, I think one of the games against UCLA, they went the middle half of the game without a made field goal from anyone other than Juju Watkins. I think ultimately they did come out with that win in the second matchup between UCLA and USC. But if they do that again, especially against a team like UConn, who can hurt you in several ways, I think that might be fatal to their chances because, they brought in, after last season, they brought in 2 more scoring threats to complement Juju and Kiki Iriafen from Stanford and Talia Van Alhoven from Oregon State. But even though Kiki has had a really good season, she can be a little bit hit or miss in especially big games. And then I've been kind of surprised that TVO Talia hasn't had much more of a big scoring role on their team. So if it comes down to Juju, and obviously she's a fantastic superstar, but so is Paige Beckers, and she has AZ Fudd, she has Sarah Strong to complement her, and they've been a little more dependable this season. So that's why I'm picking. And then Gino. I mean, Gino hasn't won a title in nearly 10 years, which is a drought, long drought by their standards. But I think he has the pedigree to get them back into another Final Four.
Yeah. It sounds like you might be due. I know that UConn is the odds-on favorite currently if you look at the betting books, and I'm sure that's partly the Paige Beckers effect in that regard, because obviously those numbers come out before we ever have a bracket. Now those numbers are maybe going to shift a little bit, knowing that they have to go up against USC, and maybe with South Carolina having such an easy path to 4, who knows what that's going to do. But yeah, I feel pretty good personally about UConn from having been the college basketball team I've watched the most of in the last 3 months. And I just feel like, from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, how healthy the team is, even though Paige has had some injury scares, like knowing how historically little AZ and Paige have played together, but when they play together, they play so well. That game where they crushed South Carolina in South Carolina, I feel like it was the top ticket resume item for me to think that they could legitimately be that team to bring Gino his first trophy in about a decade. Do you have any takeaways, Kristen, on this region in the bracket, or anything about UConn?
Well, UConn in general, like, I think Sarah Strong has been one of my top players of the year. She's been incredible every time I watch her. It's like crazy to think she's a freshman because she's already so good. In this region, I will say I don't know much about Oklahoma, but I will say I am a fan of Iowa, and I would potentially have Iowa upsetting Oklahoma
in the second
round. Iowa, obviously not having Caitlin Clark and Kate Martin this year makes a big difference. They are the 6th seed, but they've put up a huge fight in a lot of games that we've seen them in.
Yeah.
So I think, they still have that culture that Caitlin helped to build.
Sure.
She'll probably be at these games.
That's true.
What else is she doing? So I'll take Iowa going on a little run.
Yeah, I mean, ravenous fan base, that's for sure. They love their. I'm sure Jason Sudeikis will be pulling up to a game or two. Maybe not. Maybe he'll be at USC games or UConn games. I don't know where he's going to be, but yeah, I think that's fair from what I've seen of Iowa too. That maybe I'm being disrespectful to Oklahoma, but who knows?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
For more than 50 years, National University has been a military-friendly, yellow-ribbon school that understands the importance of honor and commitment. With 4 and 8-week classes available, year-round enrollment, and more than 190 programs to choose from, we help veterans just like you define the next chapter of their careers. Learn more at nu.edu. That's nu.edu.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Okay, Dat. So you're taking UConn in this region. So let's go back and look at our Final Four. You have UCLA. I realize now that I didn't ask you for the Region 2 winner, but I'm assuming you're going to go with South Carolina.
Yes, I am. I think South Carolina will get through. I think I would say, I'm sorry, Laura, I think it'll be a Duke to get to the Elite Eight, but I think South Carolina will take them down to, make it to another Final Four.
Okay. And then in our third region, you have Notre Dame, and in our last region, you're taking UConn. So if that's your Final Four, how do you feel about those Final Four matchups? and what's your championship, and then ultimately who do you feel like and I may be blowing up your spot a little bit because I assume you're going to fill out a bracket as well, but I just want to know, because you're so knowledgeable about all these teams, who do you think is really, going to be that champion, even if you don't want to give us your Final Four winners, maybe just who your favorite is to take it home.
No, I'll break down the Final Four matchups that I have. I think on the Birmingham side of the bracket, my two picks, South Carolina, Notre Dame. That's a very good matchup. Hidalgo, Cintron, Miles going up against a very stout South Carolina defense. I think the as we saw in their bad loss to UConn, like they live by getting a lot of offensive reboards. And, recently history, they had Aaliyah Boston, they had Godosel, just snagging any misses they have. They don't have that big of a rim presence as they had in recent history, which unfortunately for Notre Dame, they might not take full advantage of because they don't have a big on their side either. So I think that is going to be a very interesting matchup if South Carolina can contain Notre Dame's biggest strengths, the backcourt. Ultimately, I think South Carolina has too much depth, has that experience, and I think they're going to edge Notre Dame and reach the title game to play for a chance to defend their title. And for the other side of the other Final Four matchup, UCLA and UConn, I think UConn is going to beat UCLA. I think they're able to. Gino's going to come up with a great game plan to deny UCLA the ball into Lauren Betts. And when that happens, UCLA kind of stagnates. Because even though they have solid guards in Kiki, Rice, and London Jones, I don't think they're on the level of Beckers and Fudd when Fudd's playing well. So I think Gino's going to do that. He's going to, I think, outcoach Corey Close. She hasn't been a great in-game adjuster. So I think the Huskies are going to beat the Bruins. And then Huskies against South Carolina, I think my pick for the national title is the UConn Huskies. I think they're going to bring a title home to Storrs for this first time since Stewie's senior year in 2016. I think Paige Beckers is going to leave with a national title. And I think they're just, combination of her veteran leadership combined with like freshman of the year, Sarah Strong, I think is going to be too much for South Carolina. I mean, I think it's going to be a closer game than the 30-point blowout they had just about a month ago, but I think UConn comes out on top.
There you have it, folks. The UConn Huskies. I can certainly see it. It would be a nice little fairy tale ending for Paige as she makes her way into the WNBA. All the questions about whether or not she's going to come back for another year, I think that would be completely silenced with all that noise. And yeah, I think, we know they're a great program, and like we said, we've watched them this year, and I think it makes sense. Historically, realistically, in the women's bracket, there aren't typically many huge upsets. Like a lot of the time, it's pretty chalky, right?
In recent years, there's been a little more parity, but yes, historically, much more than the men's side of things. The women's side has been pretty on form with the top seeds having a pretty easy path, at least to like the Elite Eight. But recently there's been a couple more upsets, but a little more parity, which is nice to see. But yeah, it's been comparatively speaking to the men's side of things, it's been a lot of top seeds. You don't see as many like George Mason, like Final Four runs on the women's side as you do on the men's bracket.
It's still good. It still sounds like an exciting bracket regardless, even if there is not a ton of major upsets. Like thinking about a 3 seed making it to the Final Four, knocking off a 1 earlier in the tournament would be fun. But I still think I'm very excited about the prospect of this. I should have asked this earlier in our show, but before we go, I just have one other question. Was there any program that didn't make the bracket this season outside of, of course, your Stanford Cardinals, that you otherwise were surprised didn't show up here today?
I think it's pretty set. I think,
Okay.
Stanford was obviously the big, program name that did not make it in the tournament. But I think all the other programs, we didn't really talk too much about Maryland. And Maryland's been a program that's been around for a while. Alyssa Thomas, alum of the program, probably one of the best players to ever come out of Maryland. And they won the title about 20 years ago, but they're in the tournament as a number 4 seed. Virginia Tech made the Final Four last year, but as I mentioned, their coach and their best player left for Kentucky. So in that respect, that wasn't a surprise that they are not in the tournament this year.
Gotcha. And if you had to put some money down on the team that could be busting people's brackets, that dark horse that people are always looking for to be the differentiating factor, do you feel like there's one program that could shock the world and be this surprising rise to stardom, the Cinderella team, or do you really feel good about the ones and the twos?
I think it's weird to put this label on such a historically great program, but I think I would pick Tennessee. I think they had a great win over Connecticut late in the season. They have a new head coach. I think they could go on a run and kind of restore themselves to that former glory. They've been searching for that since, Candace Parker graced the halls of the University of Tennessee almost 20 years ago. They're trying to rekindle that magic. I think this could be the beginning of a run for them. So, Texas is really good, but I think if Tennessee is clicking on all cylinders, we've seen what they can do. And I think they could potentially, I'm not betting on it, but I wouldn't be totally surprised if Texas becomes the first number 1 seed casualty. And Tennessee makes their way all the way potentially to the Elite 8 in their section of the bracket, the bracket.
Okay.
All right.
You love to see it.
You love to see it. It's that amazing time of year, folks. March Madness finally here. We've got brackets, breaking them down. I am so glad, Dat, that you were able to join us today to talk about this as soon as we had this news and as soon as we have these matchups to look forward to. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Any final thoughts before we look to close out the show?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for having me back on the podcast. It's been a joy every time I've been able to chat with you about women's basketball. And yeah, I think it'll be just an exciting tournament to watch. There's a lot of good matchups even in the first couple rounds. Some better, some parity. So it'll be really fun to see how it all unfolds over the next month. So everyone should tune in, especially as Unrivaled ends and we still have time before the WNBA season starts. So I think it's a good time to watch some more, get your women's basketball fill right now.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Everybody get your work from homes in, get ready to watch some basketball on the clock. It's going to be a fun time. But yeah, if you would like to reach out to us here at Attack the Baseline, you can do so at our email, attackthebaseline@gmail.com. You can connect with us on Bluesky and Instagram, and do us a favor and click the link and join our bracket challenge. I'm excited to see how many people we can pull in and to see how many different winners people have, or if it's all just everybody picking UConn or picking South Carolina. Well, we know Dat will pick UConn, and I don't know if I'll do the same. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Anything for our listeners before we send it off, Kristen?
Well, I'm just, again, excited that we're being plugged in more to women's sports in general, women's college basketball, really for the first year. Last year, we watched Caitlin, but honestly, that was really it. I'm glad and excited for this bracket, of course. I will say that last year, it's true that last year, the women's finals had more viewers than the men's finals, right? So hey, let's keep that up.
Yes.
And show our support to these women instead of the men.
Let's do it. Yeah. Enjoy bracket season, folks. Dat, thank you again for joining us today. And Kristen, I'm staring at the baseline. What are we going to do as we always do?
Attack it.
Attack the Baseline. Thank you so much for listening. And we will be back soon talking about the end of Unrivaled and more upcoming WNBA news. But until then, ta-ta for now.
For more than 50 years, National University has been a military-friendly, yellow ribbon school that understands the importance of honor and commitment. With 4- and 8-week classes available, year-round enrollment, and more than 190 programs to choose from, we help veterans just like you define the next chapter of their careers. Learn more at nu.edu. That's nu.edu.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.